following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashville Mental Health. The Empower Hour will provide information and support about mental health, substance use, and behavioral health. Our goal is to share inspiring stories about transforming lives, to strike down stigma, and to encourage our community to reach out and get help when needed. Mental health is part of all of our lives. It's time we talk about it. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, President and CEO of Greater Nashville Mental Health, and it's time to get empowered. Welcome to the second episode of the Empower Hour with Greater Nashville Mental Health, where our mission is empowering people to lead full and satisfying lives through effective treatment and support. Here with me today is Kate Bernier, a licensed clinical social worker. She's our director of our Child, Adolescent, and Family Services Department. She's worked with Greater Nashville Mental Health for almost 22 years. Thanks for being here with me today, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been here a long time because I love our agency and our department, and it's been a pleasure working here. And so thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Do you mind starting with just a little bit of who you are, what you've done for the agency over the years?
Sure. I actually came to this profession later in life, but it was what I always wanted to do. At age 8, I think, I read Freud's interpretation of dreams, and that's what I want to do. And went a lot of different paths, but I came to this after I had kids and just landed exactly where I wanted to be. I studied in social work school. One of my favorite courses was family therapy. And that just was a perfect fit for me. And I thought, where do people do this? And then I interviewed here and I realized this is exactly what we do with children. It's all about families. So I just fell in love with the department as soon as I started there. Was director of an outreach program at that time, and worked with families in their homes and had other staff that would visit as well. And then through 22 years, there have been a lot of iterations, and now we have the wonderful opportunity of having you as the CEO.
Thank you.
It's been an interesting place to kind of grow in the profession and to learn, all the things that can be done.
So do you feel that there's anything that's changed significantly over that time, or?
I do. I'm trying to think. A lot of the programs in the children's department were grant funded when they were started, and so there wasn't a focus on amount of time spent and things like that, and that came into play as the years went by, and so we had to figure out how to sort of manage the staff in a way that we could get the job done and meet the needs of the agency. And there were different times when it was harder and easier to work there. And I think one of the things that's changed is it just feels rational. Decisions are made intelligently and based on good information and with the right purpose in mind. I really value thinking clinically, and there are a lot of logistics to scheduling and meeting clients where they're at and identifying their needs. But I also have this clinical focus, and even in managing staff, to me, that's the most important thing. And I think that's been embraced by the agency, and I really appreciate that. I don't feel like I have to, put that aside or, make another priority higher than that.
So the clinical needs or being clinically driven really seem to be at the priority.
Yeah.
In a way now.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason that most of us go into the field is, knowing that things can get done, that things are treatable. A lot of the the diagnoses that we work with and the family situations that we work with, people are sometimes feeling desperate or hopeless in some ways. They're not sure that things can change. And I've always kind of thought of us as standing in the gap and providing hope
Mm.
because we know that change is possible. And so I think that the people going to the field kind of holding that out for clients, and I think that really makes a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we hold hope. We
Mhm.
know that change is possible.
Mhm.
I think one of the other things that we do is help families or systems understand kids and
Mm.
what's normal and what maybe isn't normal and could use some help.
Yeah.
Recently, I heard something that I think people that are watching might benefit from
Mm.
us having a little conversation about. Was I heard somebody dismiss
Mhm.
the need for children's mental health,
Wow.
saying,
Mm.
well, they're just kids.
Uh-huh.
It's normal for them,
Yeah.
to play and pretend. And
Yeah.
I'd love to dispel that myth a little bit.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
what would you say if somebody was saying something like that? Like,
Yeah.
where is the need? Or
I've heard things like that too, and kids are so resilient. Sometimes you get the impression that they'll be fine, if we,
Mhm.
take care of them adequately. But what's happening neurologically when kids are growing up, is their brain is developing really rapidly, and particularly in the very early years, it's developing in response to relationships. So the interaction that takes place, like birth to 3, sets in motion a child's expectation of what their relationships are going to be like. And that expectation affects the way they interact with people. And the way they interact with people affects a great deal of how well they do in their family and their social settings and their sense of self and their self-worth. And more and more research has been done about what goes on in the brain at that stage. So we really understand that this is a key time of life. And one of the gratifying things about working with kids is you have that long trajectory. So
Mm.
there's an opportunity to kind of alter some of the patterns. And I say I love working with families. A lot of the families that are having a hard time, the parents are kind of fed up. They have tried a lot of good things, and they find some work a little bit or for a short period of time, but not everything. And sometimes they get into a pattern of, um, you know, being frustrated with their kids. They just become frustrated with them, and it becomes a kind of a difficult interaction. And meeting with them and working with them and families, you uncover their primary motivation is that they adore their kids and
Mm.
want wonderful things to happen in their kids' lives. And when you put them in touch with that and find, good ways of communicating, um, it's a relief. It's much easier to be proactive than to be angry.
Mm.
It takes a lot less energy, and so I think it's been helpful just to help um, parents sometimes understand what the purpose of the behavior is and what it's trying to communicate and how to
Mm.
respond in ways um, that help that are efficient and effective. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
before you used the word, we're holding the hope, we're standing in the
Mm,
gap.
mm,
As you're describing that, I hear in some ways we're preventing future problems by
mm,
walking alongside parents and kids,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
right now, while
mhm,
they may be frustrated or they've
right,
tried a few things and they're not working,
yeah,
so that instead of waiting until they're an adult with
yeah,
larger
yeah,
problems, right? And
yeah,
that's what's really important about the work, you do.
yeah, yeah. That's the way I feel. I think if you have a different trajectory early on, in the long run, it can make a really huge difference. And I think that parents want to have great relationships with their kids, um, and I think it's hard when they're working so hard to take care of their kids, but not getting what I call the bennies, not
Mhm.
getting the rewards. If it feels like it's unappreciative or the child isn't doing well and they're not sure why. And I always start with the premise that There's always a reason why people do what they do, and it may not be that easy to uncover, but if you could walk, their entire life in their shoes, you would understand that this makes sense in this moment. And often kids don't know why they're misbehaving, but um, there are ways of kind of reaching them where they're at and helping them move along as well.
So what does that look like in a department? Like what
Yeah.
does treatment look like, or what does the Child, Adolescent, and Family
Sure.
Services department look like?
Well, we have a great department, as you know. We have a wonderful therapist. Everybody who goes into this is dedicated. I think that's where you start. And we have case managers who work in the community one-on-one with clients as well. And people usually come in for therapy. They figure that their child needs somebody to talk to. The therapist will kind of get to know the main reason they came in and some of the context, and then figure out what is a way that we can address that. And sometimes it's individual therapy, sometimes it's working more closely with the parents, and sometimes it's working with the child and parent together, and we do combinations of all of those. But I think a lot of it, when you ask the question, one of the first things I thought of is helping people listen to each other. Helping parents really listen to their kids. And when kids are trying to talk to parents, especially if they're feeling, a little adolescent and they're feeling their oats, it might come across in awkward ways. It might not sound as respectful as the parent likes. And we often get stuck in addressing the behavior that's right in front of us and, go to your room and think about it. So that ends the conversation. And what I recommend to parents is, what is the meaning behind that? What is the child trying to convey? Conrad Boating, who's one of my gurus, calls it having the magic decoder ring.
The magic decoder ring.
So discerning what lies behind the behavior or the language that the child's using, and trying to address that. So, for instance, a kid felt humiliated at school during the day and they come home in really bad sorts. They might be really rude to their parent, but if the parent can see that they came home feeling kind of out of it and they're not handling it well, they might be beating up on themselves and might need somebody to come alongside and be understanding and be open to hearing what they have to say. And if the first thing that comes out of their mouth is a swear word, you don't want to end the conversation. You want to acknowledge that you want good language, but at the same time, you also want to understand. So I think listening is really key, and that goes both ways. If you can help a child really listen to the parent, then they understand the parent has good motivation. They ground them for not doing their homework because they want them to have a good education and to succeed in life and to be happy and to do well. So
what I love about what you said and what really stands out for me is not only the listening, but the not stopping a conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we do tend to do things like to stop. And
Yeah.
maybe we need that as
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a few different examples in my own life of parenting a teenager,
Uh,
where maybe I need the conversation to stop so I take a minute, but how do I do that in a way that doesn't end the conversation, right? That
Right.
says, I need a minute, let me go take a deep breath, or
Yeah.
why don't we separate for a minute, cool down, and come back together
Yes,
instead of
yeah.
just go to your room and think about it,
Yeah.
which ends it, right?
Yeah. And if there's heat behind what the kid is saying, what the child is saying, there's something there that's important to them.
Right.
And if we can't find a meeting of the minds, they'll assume all kinds of things like you don't care, or this doesn't matter to you, or it's unimportant and I'm unimportant, and things like that. And I think most of us are a little uncomfortable with conflict.
Yeah.
And I think that's often when we avoid conversations. But what I would say to parents is they don't need to prove themselves. By the gift of having children, you are a parent, and you don't need to prove to anybody that you're a parent. And in that role, the child will never be equal with you. They will always be in this position of looking up to you, and you're role modeling all the time, whether you want to or not. And because you have that kind of key important role, you don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to jump when the child barks, right? You have the luxury of really thinking about what kind of response do I want? How do I want to parent? And so sometimes it's not taking the bait when the kid picks a
Mhm,
fight. It's
mhm.
like, sitting back and saying, I'm going to think about that. If you put it a different way, I'm really happy to hear what you have to say. Or just like you said, taking a minute and coming back with the approach that makes the most sense to the
Right.
parent. Yeah.
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 So you mentioned therapies. You
Mhm,
mentioned working with kids one-on-one, working
mhm,
with parents alone,
mhm,
working with kids and families.
mhm.
And then you also have other services where
Oh, yeah.
people are meeting with kids in other ways. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about mental health,
Mhm,
they think about just therapy and medication.
mhm.
But our services are so much more than that. So I'm
Absolutely.
curious
Yeah.
how you see
Yeah.
what that looks like, how you see kids and family benefit from like the other services
Yes.
too.
Well, one of the wonderful things that we have at the agency is functional support services, um, which um, the state insurance will pay for, and it allows a one-on-one relationship with our bachelor's level case managers, and it's a relationship like a therapeutic relationship, but sometimes it's less formal. It's usually out in the community, in the child's natural environment, and they're working on the treatment plan with the same goals, but as it's and given that it's less formal, it can also be activity based. And sometimes kids will open up in a situation like that where they won't, sitting opposite a therapist in a talking situation. Um, and we just had a kind of an in-service this morning about the value of this functional support services because in these situations, the child has the undivided attention of a safe, trustworthy, reliable adult. And that's not something you can take for granted all the time these days. Families are really busy, and if there's
Hmm.
more than one child and the parents working, the undivided attention is a valuable commodity. And um, and they're also neutral, so they're not on, if there are two parents, they're not on the side of one parent or another. They're not. Um, they're somebody that the child can talk to maybe about conflicts in the home that they need some coaching to talk to their parents about. Um, so that's a wonderful intervention that we have. Um, the case managers work with clients, get to know them well. They work with them for months,
Mm.
sometimes longer, meeting with them regularly, and working as a team with the therapist. We also have groups that we run. Um, we have several groups. We have a dialectical behavioral therapy group, DBT group, that's been running for years that has the parent and client coming together. And recently, we have a new program to address substance misuse by kids, by teenagers, and that has several components, but one of the components is group, and also working with a therapist and journaling. Um, we also have case management where we look at the whole family, the needs of the family. Do they have a PCP? Is their housing secure, insecure? Um, how do they manage transportation, and help set up referrals or steer them in the right direction to get some of those needs met. So those are some of the services that
Hmm.
come to mind.
Services in the schools
That's
too is
right.
another
Yes.
thing that we
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
working partner
Yeah.
with the school systems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's been affected by COVID, and the
yeah,
schools
that's for
are
sure.
having their own struggles about whether to bring the kids in or not. So we haven't had therapists in the physical schools so far this year, but that's been our work in the past is to have therapists that are assigned to certain schools, and they develop a relationship with the schools and do therapy in the schools with our clients. So, and the other thing that I feel like has changed over the years, you'd asked me about that earlier, is that I feel that we as an agency have become more flexible and responsive to the needs as we identify them and as opportunities come along. Um, so there are new programs coming along as we speak, and one of them is um, when a significant adverse childhood event happens, that we have a mobile team that can respond and kind of address the child in the moment to help de-escalate a situation if that's what's needed, but then also follow up and help them process a difficult event that happened to prevent post-traumatic syndrome, to address the trauma in the moment and help them process that.
So again, I hear prevention and
Yeah.
hope and, setting kids and families up to have the best life they can, reach their potential, right? That's
Yeah.
part of our mission statement. And when you're talking about a child and a family, sometimes that means intervening early.
Yes. Yeah.
So then the child has more ability to reach their potential and not have things in their way.
Yeah. Another exciting new piece of training that we've had is in working with children birth to, I think it's birth to 5. But we've always worked with young kids. We've always worked with 2, 3, 4-year-olds. Um, but the opening is there now to work with kids from birth. Not that kids are born with necessarily with a mental illness. I mean, there are some things that we are born with. ADHD people are born with. Bipolar can run in families, and maybe they're at birth. But there's a lot of behavioral things that develop in response to the environment when kids are born. And sometimes that environment is very difficult. The expectant parent might be going through, a lot of crises herself. And intervening at that point in time, to me feels very promising, both to support the parent to become the parent they want to be, and then help that working with the dyad and their interaction, and helping the parent support the child through all those developmental stages.
Yeah. So again, it's like setting up the environment the best we can for the best success possible.
Yeah.
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 That's really cool.
Yeah.
So do you have any memorable moments, or are there any stories that you can think of over the past 22 years that
Oh, there are lots.
I'm sure there are.
Yes. This is not specifically about a client, but one of my first memories when I was first hired, we were in our agency's oldest building, which is at 7 Prospect Street. It's a brick building. And up and down the street, there were big colonial villas, which have mostly been torn down and since then. But about a month after I was hired, our whole department moved down the street to a big Italianate villa from the 1800s. And we've been there ever since. And there are just stories about that building that, it's, I won't tell any ghost stories. They do, they get passed around. But there's a little cupola on top, and at times when it feels like something needs to happen to kind of shake things up a little bit, we'll take a child up there as a treat just to get an overview of the city. So the building itself is very storied, but lots of wonderful memories of clients. And having been there a long time, I've actually seen kids grow up, which is really amazing. And I was saying earlier that if you intervene early, you see the trajectory change. Well, if you're around long enough, you get to actually see some of the outcome of that.
That's true.
And I've had clients come back who are now on a professional path, or have kids of their own, and are proud to show them off. And there are ways in which I think we've seen families through, some low points in their lives, and then if we're around long enough, you get to see what a difference that makes. So it's hard to go into any specific stories.
Yeah, but that sounds
identifying
very
them.
rewarding,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, to see the impact that you've
yeah,
had, or to
yeah.
have somebody come back and
And the truth is, most cases we don't get to see it, right?
Mhm.
When people are doing better, they go their way.
Right, they move on,
Yeah,
yeah.
but you sort of have faith that that they do carry that,
Mm.
that with them. One of the terms that I've taught a lot of my clients and all of my supervisees is something I got from social work school, the internalized introject.
Mm.
And what it means is when you get to know somebody and you know them long enough, you can channel them. You know what they would say in a given situation. And so I tell my clients that when you're gone and you're no longer coming to see me, you can still consult with me. I'm there in your head,
Mhm.
and then they'll recognize, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Halfway through the week before the session, they'll think, well, oh yeah, I know what Kate would say. Um, and so I think of that internalized introject as, something that we leave with clients, or
Mm.
they,
Mhm.
they leave with, and, uh, I've had them kind of confirm that that's something they take with them. And I think it's also a way of us feeling like we can launch our clients when they have done a good piece of work. Life doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not going to be.
Right.
But they've should have shown that they can solve some problems, and that they've internalized some of the things that they've taken from the therapy, and I've internalized their future. My expectations for them. So yeah,
Reminds me of kind of the term a lot of people are using now of resilience,
yeah,
right? That
mm,
we're like a tool in their resilience
yeah,
toolbox,
yeah,
right? That
yeah,
internal kind of us giving them advice, or what would my therapist say? What would
yeah,
Kate say right now?
yeah,
That it's a tool for them later on to use to
yeah,
hopefully bring
yeah,
success. Or what would my case manager say,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
Those
yeah.
kinds of things
And I think a lot of the work that we do is helping them discover all the other things that are
as
already in
well.
their toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the parents too. A lot of times when a parent is really frustrated and second guessing themselves, I'll ask them, "What would you do?" And they will I'll say, "That's a perfect answer. Don't doubt that."
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will do something different because they think they don't trust their instincts. But yeah, they all have these great strengths that
Mm-hmm.
I think we point to, and that's a lot of what we do, I think.
Yeah, often
Yeah,
the answer is within us. We
yeah,
just have a lot of
yeah,
self-doubt or other
yeah.
barriers that
Right,
either prevent us from accessing it or
right.
trusting it, one or
Yeah,
the other.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's true. I've seen that, multiple times
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll tell a parent, you've got it. I'm just your cheerleader,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's sometimes the role that we play, you know.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
sometimes we're providing skills and
Mhm.
education, sometimes we're cheerleading,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
a little of both,
Yeah. Yeah.
helping people refine it as they go.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. What
Yeah.
what do you think, um, like when I think about staff
Mhm.
of the department and you say, oh, everybody's dedicated or
Mhm.
everybody comes in,
Mhm.
for that reason. But how do you think people learn or grow? Like, have you seen staff change over the years? Is I guess kind of where my mind
Sure.
is.
Yeah. Well, we've actually taken in interns and then hired them. So or
Mm,
sometimes we hire people right out of school. And I mean, that's a beautiful stage, right? Because they've accomplished something they set out to do, which is to finish graduate school. And now they've been hired into an agency that is in line with what they want to do. Um, and then there's a huge amount of growth that comes after
mm,
that. I really appreciate the skills that they come with. Um, they're well prepared. They know what they're doing. They've done internships, so they've had some practice. But there is some self-doubt,
mm,
and over time, you see people just beginning to trust their gut, kind of like parents, and to really come up with their own style and their own approach and develop really solid relationships with their clients, and then become a resource to the department. And they're gifted in many different ways. I mean, everybody's unique, and I think one of the things I really appreciate about the department is everybody is appreciated for their different contributions and their different gifts. And I think sometimes people grow into that, over time. So it's been wonderful to see staff stick around and contribute in that way, and then become supervisors themselves, and get their licenses, and all of those things.
It's like the same sort of, getting to watch kids grow and learn, getting to watch families grow and learn. It's the same with staff.
Yeah. And the department and the agency too. It just seems like we're always poised for growth and something new.
And there's something I think about maybe that's inside us as therapists. That constant curiosity or that constant willingness to learn and grow. I think that's maybe a little inherent sometimes in the mental health field.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's a lot, I see that a lot in us.
And I when I do an in-service or when I teach or supervise, I'll often say that I think curiosity is one of the most important tools that we have. And it's not for our own curiosity, but with the client, wondering, what is this about? What's our theory about what this is about? Or, what's a way in which it could shift? Or what would it look like if this hurdle weren't in the way?
Right.
How, can we see beyond this? So it's joining with them and sort of in some ways promoting their curiosity, so that they can tackle the problem and to see it as something that they're not defined by. It's not, it's not who they are. It's something they have to deal with, and then to become curious about, what would it take, and what would it be like, and what is it,
When I hear you say that, it reminds me like that curiosity opens up creativity, right? And so it might help people generate more ideas or see a path out that they might not have seen before, or to again, maybe that answer was in them, but without that curiosity, they couldn't quite create it or find it or articulate it.
I mean, one of the things I think about is anger, because anger. When I asked him what he didn't like about anger, he said, "Well, people do bad things when they're angry," and it's true. People sometimes are kind of driven to bad behavior, and that's kind of the external thing that we see. But I would start with emotions aren't right or wrong. They just are, and they give us information about what's going on with us. And I would say anger is valuable because it signals to us that something happened that shouldn't have happened. And if we can take that information and then manage our anger, that's very useful. But one of the things that people come into therapy for is this unmanageable anger. And so it's often eye-opening when you talk to a client about, well, this happened, and then this much anger came out. And does that make sense to you? Does this feel like an ocean of anger? And does it feel, they might say, well, it was over nothing. And then that's where, inviting them to be curious comes in. Like, that's really interesting. There's a real disconnect there. Do you have an idea what that's about? Maybe they don't. And they say, well, are you curious? I wonder, maybe we could sort through that and
talk about where it might be. Or
And then it becomes this external thing that you can be curious about that doesn't necessarily define you. It's something that you're working on in some ways.
Right. So that helps not feel deficient or, like there's something wrong with me. I can be more curious about how that happened or why that happened.
Exactly. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I think there's always a reason why something's there, and this ocean of anger that springs up. I'm sure there's a reason why that's there, and we won't necessarily always know what it is. I mean, sometimes people It's very early in life, changes in caregivers, or a parent who is absent because they had an operation or was ill, or sometimes very innocent things. People who have surgeries really early on. Um, Small children count on their parents to prevent pain, and sometimes parents have no choice,
Can't,
but
yeah.
they have to have medical procedures done. The child has to. So that anger may have started, long before they have a narrative to explain why. So it can be really helpful. It can be a real relief to, you know, either identify the issue or just know that there probably is one, that it makes sense, that they have these feelings. It doesn't make them a bad person,
Yeah.
or, that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two things came into my head as you were talking. One is one of my favorite quotes is, emotions are indicators, not dictators,
Ah,
right? So they indicate things. They shouldn't
Yeah.
dictate our behavior.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite quotes. Then the other thing I was thinking about, like as you're talking about, we might not find the answer, but sometimes just in generating alternative explanations helps decrease the emotional content, right? We teach that in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, like you're talking about one of the groups we have, right? That, if somebody cuts you off, and if you think something really badly about that person, you're going to get mad. But if you think, oh, maybe they're on their way to the hospital, maybe they're on their, way to work, and they were told, if they were late one more time, they were going to get fired. But, they're a single parent and their babysitter didn't show up this morning, right? We have no idea which one of those alternative explanations is true. But sometimes just generating them allows us to think more critically and not be so emotional. And,
Absolutely. And those examples that you just gave, I've used those myself over and over again. And there is that adrenaline rush, when somebody first cuts you off, when that happens, and then the relief comes when you think, one of those alternative explanations, and that's a real experience, going from that anger to the relief, and it really, kind of illustrates the emotions are indicators, not dictators, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, the meaning we makes a really big difference.
It really does. And I think so that it all cycles back to curiosity, right? So if we're curious, then we generate alternative explanations, we can calm down those emotions, and it's like you can do that as a parent with your kid, right? It doesn't have to be a therapist that, that generates those alternative explanations.
And you can do it for your parents too. I mean, sometimes parents of our clients had difficult childhoods of their own, and may harbor some anger, and they may never get an answer about what went on with their parent. But it's the same kind of thing that most parents want I would say all parents want what's best for their kids, and I've never seen an exception. And not all parents are in a position to provide everything a child needs at any given moment. But I think when you get down to that sort of fundamental assumption, it can be a relief. You don't have to be angry at this person.
Right.
You don't have to harbor that. But
so neat. I love thinking about just stories, because I think people can learn a lot from stories. And so, you've shared so many great things, but I'm curious about pride. Is there anything that leaves you proud of being part of the organization or the department? Or
thinking about our clients, there was one client that essentially didn't have any parents. She, I think one of her parents had died, and the other parent was kind of MIA. And she was couch surfing. She had a relative that I think was her legal guardian, but not much oversight. She was an older teen, but she really engaged in therapy. She wanted to figure out who she was, what mattered to her. She hadn't figured that out. How she wanted to live. She wanted to sort of have a moral compass in some ways, and she didn't feel like she had it. And I didn't give it to her. I didn't give her my moral compass. I just kind of helped her explore um, the things that mattered to her. And I worked with her for several years, 2 or 3 years, and during that time, she had significant a boyfriend. She got pregnant. She had a child. Um, some difficulties came after that, but she really hung in there and continued to find ways to improve her life. And later on, she had a second child, and that presented some challenges. But she really became more and more stable, more and more grounded, more and more intentional. She graduated from high school. She got her driver's license. She got a job. She ended up in I think, a pretty solid relationship with one of the fathers. And I felt like she launched into an adulthood that was promising. I mean, she really was a very solid person that needed to find her grounding. And I think that, you can list the problems along the way, but the work that she did, I think, just bodes really well for her. So I felt proud because I felt like I had a hand in raising her. And it just and what I did really was to sit with her and witness her growth and reflect it back to her so that she recognized who she was. It wasn't something that I gave her. It was just bearing witness and kind of being alongside of her. And I think that that's what a lot of parenting is. So that's why I say I raised her because yeah.
So you set an environment within the therapeutic
Yeah,
context
yeah,
within which she felt safe to explore,
yeah.
learn, grow, even fail.
Yeah, even fail, exactly. And at all times respectful of her as a person and believing in her. And I think that's really key because even though adolescents can be very diffident and challenging and act like they're all that, there's a lot of panicking that they're going through, and a lot of that is cover. And I think even though their social milieu is really their key element, knowing that the home fires are burning, that somebody's there that believes in them and has faith in them, I think is enormous. And that's kind of like bearing witness and allowing them to fail and you can fix this. It's going to be tough, but you can fix this. And kind of hanging in there with kids, I think, is a lot of parenting as well. But
yeah, it reminds me of one of the misconceptions about therapy or all of the work that we do in community mental health, that somebody's going to be fixed, it's going to be good, they're going to be better, instead of recognizing everybody's life, whether people are in treatment, not in treatment, has fits and starts, has good days and bad days. And so you could take a snapshot at any moment, like of the young lady you were speaking of, and you might think, oh, this didn't work. But when you step back and look at the big picture, you can really see that growth and that trajectory. And so I think that's a really important point, that it's not about a moment in time. It's not about a good day or a bad day, but it's about what trajectory, that word that you've used, right? Are you setting up for yourself, and are you set up to shift your trajectory? And if so, then it's working.
Yeah, right. So because sometimes if people run into a major hurdle, like getting pregnant as a teenager, that may feel like a failure and be really down on themselves. And the truth is, life goes on, and you're still going to have responsibilities, and all of the gifts and strengths that you haven't lost. You just sort of bring them to bear on this new situation, and do your best, use your best judgment. But it's hard to do without somebody who witnesses that and kind of feeds it back to you. So yeah, I've been privileged to come alongside some situations like that. There was another family that I worked with for quite a long time, and one of their kids just wouldn't leave their bedroom. They were reclusive, and not just my work, but the work of a team. This kid graduated from high school, got a girlfriend, a job, complete change in their life, and those aren't isolated examples. It's just a couple that come to mind.
Mm.
But,
You've given us so many gems about how parents can help empower teens, or kids in general, by bearing witness, by listening, by not ending conversations, just by holding hope, by knowing that there's solutions, things can get better. Are there any things that you do in your own personal life that help empower you to lead your best life or live to your own potential?
So thank you for that question. I'm paused because there are a lot of things that I recommend and know to do. And like anybody else, I have to remind myself to do them. But one of my, I think, probably most effective ways of grounding myself and feeling like I have my head screwed on straight is probably mindfulness. And there are different ways for me to be mindful. And exercise is one of them. I swim, and that's like sensory deprivation. And when I'm swimming, I can just be here now and be in the moment. And I think yoga is another, great, great way of. There are a lot of definitions of yoga. One is to have a kinder relationship with your body, and I think that, a lot of times we are bringing the body and mind together in the work that we do. And if you bring them together, if you take care of them, if you're mindful about them, I think that it's just easier to handle the things that come along. And I'll also put in a pitch for sleep. Good sleep hygiene is really important, and something that I am constantly challenged with, but I know that it's important. I think it comes down to taking care of yourself and knowing that that's not being selfish, that it's really important. And I encourage it in the staff, and I think the staff has really, kind of taken that on. And you have invited experts to come and talk to us about good self-care. So the agency endorses it. So we talk about having movement breaks, between sessions, and we also, from time to time, try to liven things up and, have a internal contest or, treat or something like that. A little bit of fun
comes to my mind.
Yeah, yes, fun with Play-Doh.
I have Play-Doh on my desk that came from your staff, actually.
Yeah, spread the wealth,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned sleep. That's one I think we do a lot of teaching to people about, and then forget to do ourselves. So one of my dear friends said to me, set a sleep alarm.
Wow.
And he's like, we set get up alarms. Why don't we set sleep alarms? And I will tell you, every night it hits, and I'm like, how can it be time already? And then it's like, had I not had that alarm, I probably would have just kept on chugging, right? And so that alarm goes off. I go do my routine, and then
it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's so so funny. It's funny that you mentioned that one as a one. But
and I think that kind of makes the case that turning things into routines can be really helpful, because then you're not creating it anew every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I so appreciate you coming and spending this time with me on the Empower Hour show with Greater Nashville Mental Health here, and for your 22 years of dedication to our agency. I mean, you've definitely given some wisdom, I think, to those that'll listen or watch the episode around, how they can empower themselves, their children, their families, or whoever it might be. So any parting words?
Thank you for having me. I think this is a great opportunity, and I just appreciate your leadership and the ideas that you bring, and it's opened things up, I think, for all of us to be the best that we can. So,
right. And that's what it's all about, empowering people to lead full and satisfying lives. And at Greater Nashua, that means through effective treatment and support, but we really want the whole community, our clients, our staff, and everyone to live the best life that they can live. So, thank you for being here with me today, and thank you for watching the Empower Hour with Greater Nashville Mental Health.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.